Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Born. Hey, did you know my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation? Head over to setitonfire.co now to learn more. Well, I'm really excited about my guest today, Yosef Beck, and that's because we have actually gotten to work together before. He's spent over 10 years in his career consulting with over 70 different clients. And then he went into the hospitality industry, which is where he and I met, working for IHG. And he was basically the director of security, architecture, and data security. And now he's moving into a new role, which we'll probably talk about a little bit, VP of cybersecurity at a large building materials organization. And so awesome wealth of knowledge. I'm super excited for you to meet Yosef today. We're going to jump in and talk about cybersecurity. Welcome to the podcast, Yosef.
Thank you, Natalie. It's great to be here.
All right. Well, let's start with how you got into the world of cybersecurity. As a matter of fact, I was visiting with you, I think it was a couple months ago, and I was curious too. I was like, how did you get into cyber? And I just loved your answer of the twists and turns in your career. So I'd love to start there.
Sure. At IHG, we have what we call our twisty approach to careers, and it's definitely been a twisting and turning approach here. So I started off when I was in college, and when I was at Georgia Tech, I got the opportunity to intern for a three-letter agency. I did that for 2 summers, and while they were more physical security related, more around logistics than cyber, I was definitely very much immersed in the security culture. It strongly influenced my interests, and the desire to help protect people. And then after college, as you mentioned, I was in business management consulting for a long time, but I always seemed to find roles that overlapped with security. So, a couple examples, I helped a large law firm audit a bank to ensure they weren't doing transactions with anybody on the United States' sanctioned entity list. Another one was helping a very large SAP implementation project. They had over 200 consultants, and we had to get security audit ready. And so, helping prepare the whole project team for how we were going to do that and maintaining audit logs essentially in preparation for the audit. And then I also got the opportunity to do things like program manage the development and implementation of a new credit card processing system that had over 20,000 businesses that leveraged it as a business, not consumer, but business credit card line. So that was very, very interesting. Eventually, I got the opportunity, right, to start helping clients respond to data breach incidents and managing both the response and the remediation activities. And when I wanted to go deeper into cyber, I realized I had to leave the consulting firm. I got the opportunity to join IHG Cyber Team, where I've been in a number of different roles. Started off with PCI compliance, then security architecture, security engineering, and most recently data security. And then, as you mentioned, I'm moving on to my next opportunity here, but very excited.
Yeah, you've had an incredible background as you kind of look at, like you said, the twists and turns. And cyber has been a topic that, I mean, I'm sorry, but every company should be talking about it. And if it's not, something's wrong, right? Because we're seeing so many organizations go through the whole hackers, attackers, bad actors. Like we're seeing it all right now. It's coming in the headlines every day. You know, the language that I'm hearing now is it's not if, but when someone is potentially attacked. A lot going on in the news about this. What are some of the headlines that are standing out to you right now?
Good question. First of all, I read a lot of headlines. That was probably the best piece of advice I picked up in college, honestly. It's from a professor who told us to always make sure to read one technical article that was outside your own area of expertise, just to be aware of what else is going on. So, a couple things stuck out to me recently. One is that I was very excited that the US finally started to draft a national data privacy law. As much as I want to see companies able to make money as a end user or end recipient of that, right? I don't
Mhm.
appreciate how much they take advantage of our personal information without
Right.
informed consent. So that's a big one. Another that's come up that kind of hits close to home here in Atlanta, right? That I always pay attention to class actions or notifications about data privacy or data breach incidents. I
Mhm.
try to learn from others' mistakes, essentially. And there was one recently in April about the class action brought against Children's Healthcare of Atlanta for sharing HIPAA information with Meta. And that one was definitely very surprising. I would love to talk to somebody in their privacy department because my guess is they didn't quite realize what was happening. So that was very interesting. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, I also enjoy speaking to vendors, right? I love learning about new security capabilities as they come out and seeing how they're evolving the space, and obviously read a lot of their blogs as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating, honestly, cybersecurity in the headlines. And we all know about the big breach around Change Healthcare. That was the big topic
Yes.
for several months, right? For almost everybody, had a big impact across a number of different industries, hospital systems. Anyone who took, any type of medical or dental payments was impacted. A lot of folks impacted by, that particular breach. And we're seeing more and more that that's kind of the point of some of these cyber attacks is to hit as many people at one time where it hurts. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing in the news. How can people protect themselves? How can organizations protect themselves from being hacked? Where do they need to be, starting? What do they need to think about? What should be top of their mind?
Yeah, definitely. We can talk through that. Just to go off that choice healthcare thing, though, it's interesting. So this past couple months, I actually attended the FBI runs what they call a Citizens Academy,
Wow.
and I got to participate in that, which was a lot of fun. But one of the other participants was actually one of the BISOs or Business Information Security Officers for Choice Healthcare. And so it was definitely interesting because it was public during this time, and we chatted quite a
Yeah.
bit about it. So in terms of like main ways people can protect themselves, it's a big topic. We could probably be here all week, probably still have stuff to talk about. I would say it differs, right? It depends on, are we trying to protect individuals or organizations? But
Mhm.
for the most part, they're similar, just obviously drastically scaled down for the average person. I would say first and foremost, don't skip the basics, right? You stay on
Mm.
top of patching all your devices. People when they're at home, they think of their phone maybe or their computer, making sure those get updated. But the reality is we've got a lot of stuff at our homes that are connected to the internet. Making sure that those other IoT devices, whether it's your hot water heater or your coffee maker or what have you, they're getting patched. The other thing is don't hook something up to the internet if it doesn't need to get hooked up. I actually heard a recent story from one of my colleagues where they have a smart refrigerator. On the front of it, they have a screen. It's like down in their basement, and they had not realized that they shouldn't have it online. And then other kids were doing what kids do on the internet through their refrigerator because they had
Oh,
locked down everything
no.
else, but not that.
Gosh. I
um,
mean, they will find a loophole, won't they?
Yes. Yep. They're some of the best little hackers out there. It's great. Along the same lines, right? My other favorite example about this is again hot water heater. A couple years ago I had to upgrade my own, and I went to a big box store based out of Atlanta, incidentally enough, bright orange, and was going to buy one. And the person there was trying to upsell me for $50 more. I could hook it up to the internet, and I was like, why would I want to do that? They
Yeah,
didn't really have a good answer, and I'm like, I've never changed the temperature on my hot water heater once I've hooked it up. I don't need the ability to go in there and change it. I'm okay.
yeah,
And I'm not saying there isn't a good use case to do, but if I don't have a good reason to put it on the internet, why would I open up another vulnerability?
that's right.
And then I know most companies would hate to hear me say this, but use an ad blocker anywhere and
Mhm.
everywhere, right? If they're offered, turn it on. Use them on your home networks, put them on your corporate networks, put them on your phone, anywhere. There's really two ways, primary ways that people get hacked. You click on a link that takes you to a site where you accidentally either install something you shouldn't or you reveal something you shouldn't,
Mm,
right? And one of the easiest ways to make sure you're slowing down or reducing the noise and not going to things that potentially are malicious is by blocking ads and spam. There are also have been cases where ad delivery networks are used to actually deliver when you're loading an image in your browser. It can actually compromise the browser potentially and deliver malicious code to your device, and you would not know. you know Obviously, as a business, I would want you to see my ad, but as an end user, it's not worth the risk. So
right.
kind of to summarize, right, it's patch all the things, don't hook them up to the internet unless you have to, and block all the bad things you possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, this is such important conversation. I even think about the fact that, when you think about an attack or you think about kind of the steps that a hacker would go through, I mean, it really does start with them trying to figure out a specific place where they can find a weakness or gain entry. And so a lot of the steps that you're talking about is how do you shut down obvious weaknesses, obvious entry points into what you're doing. I wonder, like, if we were to talk about this from an employee standpoint for a second, because when we think about employee experience, oftentimes when an organization is hacked, the employees can be left feeling kind of invaded or weird. Typically, right, a lot of employees will leave in the cybersecurity space after a cyber event And, let's talk about a CISO, right? I mean, typically they have a pretty short-term tenure. It's only 24 to 48 months. What's hard about being attacked is that the people who were on the side of the attack, who were most intelligent and educated and able to solve for the problem, are now gone, right? So you kind of
Mm.
lose all the knowledge of how you got through that attack once it's over. There's huge impact. So what are some of the ways, like maybe some simple ways internally in an organization, that somebody can help employees think about how to protect their organization and their organization's data?
It's a great question. So actually, I published a article about this recently. I was having a conversation with a CIO about the fact that he was very frustrated that he had, been doing phishing simulations for a while and really was not seeing improvement from the employees.
Mm,
And you know, during the conversation, didn't really get to resolution, but I went back and thought about it some more. And part of the issue is, and actually there's a Google blog post about this that kind of backed me up on this recently, which was great. But when we're doing phishing simulations, right, the way it typically works is you have somebody, they send out a fish. They're usually kind of cheesy, right? And people either catch on and don't click on it and report it, or they accidentally click on it or what have you, right? And then they
mhm.
take them to a training site. You watch a short video or two, you move on with your life, and then you get to do it all over again in a month.
Right.
Um, you're not really reinforcing or training them, right? And so it doesn't really affect stuff. What what I feel is, first and foremost, you have to security is not security's job. Security is the company, the
Mhm.
organization's job. You need to have everybody bought into a security mindset is what I like to call it, and a culture. And everybody is responsible. One of the most interesting ones I heard was a company here in Atlanta. They're in the medical insurance business, and they actually made everybody's bonus for the year tied to security, which I thought
Wow.
was really cool. It wasn't a big percent. It was like 5% of your bonus, but
Yeah.
I thought that that really drives home that, hey, this is important. Now, I don't expect majority of companies to run out to do that, but I think it's a
Mhm.
great thing to strive towards. But, for example, going back to the email phishing, one of the things that I think we need to learn from is when I'm training somebody to do a role, right? I don't just have them watch a couple videos. I give them an SOP to follow, right? A standard operating procedure. We walk through what's their roles and responsibilities. They need to understand they are responsible for this, and here's the steps you have to take. You know, Identifying a phishing email can be quite challenging. It's
Yeah.
not as simple as, you know, oh, you just won $1 million. Click here. Yeah, that's probably phishing, right? But
Mhm.
they can be a lot more sneaky. They can spoof your internal email so it looks like it's coming from somebody you know. There's lots of things they can do, but those are all things you can check for. And so having a checklist, and I've actually published this recently, I don't remember, 7, 10 items that you can go down and look for. And it's not saying that if one of them is a red flag that means it's a phishing email. But by the time you get down to the end of the list and you found 4 or 5 of these, it's highly suspicious. I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call that person and say,
Mhm.
"Hey, did you send me this email? Let's just double check." Right? There's
Yeah.
no harm in double checking. And so it's the type of training and responsibility that I think needs to get infused more into companies to help protect them.
That's really good. Let's go through and actually talk about the anatomy of a hack. Like what happens when let's take it from end to end. Like how do they get in? What are they doing while they're, waiting? What ends up
Sure.
happening through the process? And then what happens at the end? Like take us kind of end to end of what that might look like.
Okay. So there are a lot of frameworks that are published on this, mostly obviously from the good guy's perspective, trying to threat model and understand how this works.
Right.
I don't think that the hackers necessarily follow all the steps in the framework. Let's put it that way. But in general, there's 7 of these steps. So bear with me. The first one's reconnaissance, right? They're going to try to identify some sort of weakness to exploit, whether that's a person or whether it's, a vulnerability on your website or what have you. Then they're going to try to figure out, okay, I found a weakness. How can I weaponize that essentially?
Mm,
How can I exploit that? Then they're going to try to deliver something to you to get you to exploit that weakness, whether that is, maybe they found somebody posted a secret or credentials online, or they were able to buy it from somebody else who'd stolen it from you originally. They're going to send a phishing email, try to get you to download something that you shouldn't, right? They're going to try to deliver something to get in to your systems to take an action to let them in, right?
mhm,
Once they're in, they're going to try to exploit that. They're going to try to get further to further their own objectives, right? So they're going to try to look for more credentials or more vulnerabilities. They're
Mhm.
going to try to install things to allow them access, even if you were to kick them out, right? So
Mm.
you're going to put in back doors. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the next step, which is installation, right? It doesn't always occur, but that's where, again, they're trying to install more malware, again, to keep that
Mhm.
foothold in your environment. Command and control is the sixth step. That's where they're going to use whatever they've installed or whatever access they've been able to get to start to carry out their objectives, right? And that could be
Mhm.
things like it could just be they want to just stay there. They just want to
Mhm.
maintain presence so that they can see what's happening in the company, and they may be there for a long time. It can be very hard to detect them. It could be that they want to install ransomware. They want to, install screen scrapers, see capture information that's flowing through your system's key loggers, those types of things. And on occasion, they could just be on a seek and destroy mission. They want to
Mhm.
start deleting stuff, right? They're malicious. And then finally, they're going to action on their objectives, right? That's where they get what they want. That's their goal. They're going to steal the data. They're going to send you
Mhm.
the ransomware note and wait to get paid. Or they again start deleting data, or they might be using your systems to attack other systems, right? They've installed a botnet and now they're going to use you to attack somebody else that they want to get at. So those are kind of the seven steps and typically how this works. And our job in security is to really look at each one of these and try to make their job as hard as possible, ideally
Mhm.
impossible, wherever we can. And if they do get through, how do we know about it so that we can react quickly?
Yeah, this is really good. I was just reading something the other day that said in 2023, it took an average of 204 days to identify a data breach. Oh my goodness, that's a long amount of time. And then an additional 73 days to contain the breach. And what you realize is, again, without a sophisticated team, and sometimes even with a sophisticated team, it can take a while to identify that the breach has actually happened, and then to close the gap around that breach can take quite a while to actually close it down.
I would say it really depends who you ask, right? I have seen metrics that, yes, are very long. Overall, I would say the last 10 years, the trend has drastically decreased. We've gotten a lot
Mhm.
faster. I would also say, though, the bad guys have adapted to that, where now we don't see them really waiting that long, right? If they're going to
Mhm.
deploy ransomware, they're going to try to do it as quick as they can. Or if they want to delete something, they're not waiting. As soon as they
Mhm.
get access, they're going to start doing it.
Yeah. Have you seen the dark web menu? I think that would be kind of fun. I'll rattle off a couple things and then you can tell me if this still feels current to you. Basically, dark web data menu basically talks about how much it basically someone would buy your information for. The most recent one I've seen is $500 for a high quality US driver's license, $25 for a hacked Facebook account, $110 for a stolen credit card, $200 for high quality US identification card, and $150 for an online login with a minimum of $100 in the account. Essentially, for about $1,000, a criminal can have their hands on pretty much everything they need to steal a person's identity. Does that track with some of the numbers and stats that you've heard?
I think, unfortunately, our data is worth a lot less at this point.
Those seem
but
high, huh?
yeah, too high, but definitely that data is out there, unfortunately. And again, partially it goes back to my earlier comment around needing stronger data privacy controls. Companies should not be collecting all of this, especially without our consent, because they're in there to make money. They're not in
Yeah.
there to protect our data in general. If they can, then sure, they're going to minimize their own risk by doing so, but that's not their primary goal. And so we're kind of at odds with ourselves, unfortunately.
Mhm. So talk about innovation in the space because obviously there's a lot that's happening not only out there in the space of tech, but then within cyber. I feel like
Mhm.
cyber is actually having to move much more rapidly to keep up with some of the things that we're seeing happen right now. So what are you seeing in this space?
So there's a lot of small things and a couple of larger things. There's definitely a lot of incremental innovation, right? We're forever caught in this cat and mouse game. The bad guys figure out something better or new, and we realize it and figure out a better or new way to detect and keep them from happening again. I think some of the most interesting areas to me right now are one is post quantum cryptography, making sure that the data we think is adequately encrypted today actually remains encrypted in the future. I personally believe that there are large governments out there today that have that capability that can get around encryption today. And I think that give it 3 to 5 years, it's going to go mainstream and probably, if not sooner. So
Wow.
I do think this is going to be a big problem for us because we're going to have to catch up. And essentially, any data that was encrypted before that got transmitted over the internet, you're going to have to assume is now available to somebody. It won't be everybody at first, but over time, people will have that capability. And I think that's going to be a challenge.
Mhm.
I think another big area that continues to evolve very fast is public cloud and SaaS security. More and more providers are trying to, with public cloud, you have a shared responsibility model, right? The cloud providers responsible for some things, and then I, as a user, am responsible for some things. With SaaS, it's starting to shift as well to try to push more on us. For example, more and more providers are recognizing that if they expose the underlying logs and the APIs to the security people at a company that's using their services, now I can have you do a lot of the monitoring, give you a lot of the responsibility, which is great because it does give us visibility that we haven't had before, but it also again puts more responsibility and risk on us versus us essentially outsourcing it to the SaaS provider saying, no, that's your job, you own the system.
Mm.
So I think that's going to be very interesting to watch and how that kind of shakes out. And what there's also a lot of exciting tools right now that are able to give us a much better understanding of misconfigurations, overly permissioned users, improperly secured data, things like that, that we don't have in a traditional data center per se, or it's much harder to get that visibility. But in the cloud and with SaaS, a lot of that's a lot easier to do, a lot easier to deploy, a lot cheaper in general. And so I think we're still trying how to figure out how to best leverage that,
Mhm.
but because it's an overload of information, honestly, but it's a really good problem to have.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, as you think about kind of the broader landscape beyond that, what final thoughts would you have about how we should be looking at the world of cyber, especially in the innovations that are coming?
Yeah. So it's a term that's very overused right now by vendors, right, in the media. But the
Yep.
last item is, of course, Gen AI, right? And seeing how that impacts cyber and the data privacy as a whole. I think the good news is I don't think Gen AI, at least in its current form, is becoming the Terminator here.
Right.
I don't think we have to worry about that. And I think the other good thing is we've come a long way. OpenAI really came out about 18, 19 months ago now. And we've seen a huge change already, even in just security tooling around AI and how to think about it, how to threat model it, how do you test it and prevent things from happening. There's a lot of data privacy concerns, but I think there's a lot of ways we've already, as an industry, started to shift to address those and figure out how to make sure we're not sharing information to the wrong users, those types of things. I think the bad news is, right, we're again very much in the infancy. There's years and years ahead of us of brilliant criminals figuring out ways to exploit the systems. Good news for me in cyber is that I have job security. Bad news is we're going to be fighting these people for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, that seems to be the name of the game is that you just have to stay ahead because it's always evolving. It's always changing in terms of what you need to know. But I want to say that, just in the times that we've got to interact around this conversation, I'm grateful that a mind like yours is helping us solve problems like these. I'm very grateful for that.
I appreciate it. I enjoy it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you for catching up with me. It's been great to see you again, and thanks for your time
Likewise.
today, Yosef.
Yep.
If you want to
Have
follow
fun again
Yosef,
too.
you can head. Yeah, thank you. You can head over to LinkedIn and check him out at Yosef Beck. His link will be in the show notes. Please follow him. Wealth of knowledge, super knowledgeable on this topic, and a great thought leader to follow. Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box, and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.
Hey, my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. Click on the link to learn more. And don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.